Hello, my name is Loren Munk. I'm a painter and an amateur historian, and I live in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
I'm Emily Nam. We are art people.
My joke is that I have two personas. I have the Loren Munk character, the Loren Munk, which is the name I was born with, and that's my children's name and all that stuff. So that's one persona. Then I have the James Kalm persona, which is the name that I've been writing art criticism and art reviews under for 23 years, 24 years. So the James Kalm is probably more gregarious and more outgoing. The Loren Munk is the guy that's for spending 3.5 years in the studio painting text onto a huge map and doing other kinds of things like that.
Loren Munk is a preeminent vlogger and maker of vibrant paintings about the history of the New York art community. Reflecting on his days as a Boy Scout and relationships with maps, his cartographic paintings are engaged in a history that has evolved through his own journey and investigations as a painter. Loren calls himself an amateur researcher. I believe he is a real researcher and a person who has obtained a unique perspective and understanding of the New York phylogeny of art. Something that Loren reflects on is the idea of the symbiotic relationships that exist within art communities. Saying hello to your artist neighbour at the bodega where you buy your milk, sharing a drink at the local bar. It may not be a significant exchange, but these passings are present. His nom de plume is James Kalm, an art fanatic that rides a bike around the boroughs and visits galleries and art shows in New York City. He makes wobbly videos which are posted on two prominent YouTube channels, The James Kalm Report and James Kalm Rough Cut, quoted as the freshest and most urgent art coverage on the internet. For any missed or archived exhibitions, the resources published by James Kalm are my first point of reference. The rawness is accessible, you can see the paintings in full view, and sometimes you might get a glimpse of that New York City art critic you've always wanted to meet. With 18 years of footage, these two channels have amassed nearly 1,600 programs and many millions of views. Loren is an alchemist, a painter, a filmmaker, a provocateur, and a humble figure. If you are in New York, you might see him riding past you on a bike. I forgot to ask if he wears a helmet. Well, thank you, Loren, for joining me today. It's really a pleasure.
Hi, Emily. Well, the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, and we were just talking, so you're in Red Hook in Brooklyn,
Yes.
which is an interesting part of New York because it's by the water, but it is a little bit of a hook line away from Manhattan.
It's not that far, but I get up and I can look at the Manhattan skyline from the south end of
Yeah,
it, and
beautiful.
it's beautiful. And also, if you're in Williamsburg, you just follow the waterfront down around through Dumbo and around Brooklyn Heights, and you come down to where I'm at in Red Hook.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful bike ride now that they have
Yes,
bike lanes that whole way through. I think the
beautiful.
challenge with Red Hook is getting there by subway, or it feels the transport not by bike is more difficult.
Yes,
I've been to some events at the Pioneer Works, and it's always a challenge to get home.
we stop in there quite often, and I anytime I'm driving through the neighborhood, I always pedal by and sort of stick my nose in the windows to see what's going on there at Pioneer Works.
Yeah, it's a
And
great
I've known
place.
Dustin Yella for, gosh, probably 20 years at this point.
I just want to go into a bit of your history. So you grew up in Utah. You were born in Utah, is that correct?
I was born in Utah, baptized on Temple Square. I guess I have some mainline Mormon heritage, although I was, well, our whole family were kind of wild child kinds of people, so I never got into the deep part of it. But yeah, that was the neighborhood, the milieu that I grew up in. And when I was about 11, my mom remarried and we moved up to Idaho. And so at this point, I kind of consider myself an Idaho guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was even wilder. I mean, more, well, I shouldn't say primitive, but there were more mountains. There was a lot more open country. Salt Lake was a fairly large town for that part of the country, and Pocatello was about 40,000 people in the middle of the Rockies, and it was a little different.
So, did you grow up with a lot of nature? Did you do a lot of
Yes.
activity, hiking, and things like that? Or what
Well,
kind
we
of.
did a lot of hiking, and I was in the Boy Scouts and all that stuff, and also I worked on farms when I was growing up. We There was actually what we considered very good jobs moving irrigation pipe during the summer. So we'd go out there about 5 o'clock in the morning and we'd move these 40-foot long aluminum pipes that had sprinklers, rainbirds on them, and we would move them across the fields. And if you did it all summer long, you could make a pretty good little pile of money at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our outside work, but you see a lot of interesting things out there. You're out in the fields on a place called Mashad Flats, and you'd be moving the pipes at the sunrise, and you'd look over and you'd go, what's that thing that's running across the field? And it would be a coyote or a badger or something like that. And also, it was near one of the largest Indian reservations in the continental United States. So we had a lot of interaction with the Bannock Shoshone tribes, and so it was a lot of interesting and fun things.
Was that accessible? Like, was that just part of, or inclusive? Were you able to learn and develop an understanding of their culture and their ways of living?
Well, we really didn't. These were just people that you'd see, and you'd go in, and maybe you'd hang out with them, or go through the reservation. You stop at the stores and go in and talk to them. And some of these people came and went to high school with us, and so I mean, I didn't. I kind of just, I guess, learned about their culture and stuff just from being close to them and kind of seeped in. They'd be talking about things and the way that I thought about things, and you'd be talking about your ideas and things, and you just kind of mutually start to kind of pick up on things and respect things and sort of have an insight that maybe you wouldn't have if you're looking at it in too clinical of a way.
So you lived together, yeah, and it just was part of life.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And then you moved to Germany and you were in the US Army for a few years.
Yes, I was. Well, my brother was drafted. This was during the Vietnam War. My brother was drafted, and they ended up finding out that he had a predilection for technical things, and so he ended up being trained as a radiologist. And I mean, that's better than being a tail gunner at a helicopter flying over South Vietnam or something. So they sent him to a hospital in Germany, Landstuhl, Second General Hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. And when I went in the Army about a year later, I was stationed at the same place as he was. And so basically, we kind of got to spend about a year and a half together, and I got to see my nephew born there and all that stuff. And I mean, it was very good, but it was during the height of the Vietnam War,
Mm.
and there were a lot of people that were suffering from various kinds of post-traumatic stress syndrome things, and they didn't want to send them back stateside yet, so they would sort of send them to Germany for a year or two to try to decompress them and maybe, I don't know, get them readapted to something closer to civilian life. So that was interesting as well. A lot of
Mm.
weird
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, definitely colorful in
Yes, very colorful.
and then you made the decision to go to New York, which is where you are now, and if I'm right, that was in the late 70s, so
So the mid '70s.
yeah.
One of the benefits of me going into the army and being stationed in Germany for 2.5 years was that that is where I really got a lot of my original art education. I was able to go to Paris and go to visit the Louvre, and I went to Berlin and went to the Neue National Gallery and the Broika Museum, and went to Munich and the Pinakothek and all that, and kind of toured around Europe visiting all of the great museums. And they always have a little bookstore at all the army bases and stuff. So I'd go into the bookstore and I would buy an art history book, something could be about Rembrandt or take your pick. And I would read the books and then it would say, oh, these pieces are in such and such a collection. And I go, oh, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Oh, so my next leave, I would say, gee, I got a week coming up. I'm going to take off. I'll go to Amsterdam for 4 or 5 days and spend a day or two sitting in front of the night watch or something like that. And so I did that all over Europe. And it was probably the basis of my education. And I guess probably if I was to say it, I probably have a kind of a more of a German view of art history because of seeing so much of that stuff when I
Mm.
was a young, impressionable artist.
And had you defined yourself as an artist at that stage, or it was just something that hit you and then when you had to maybe make decisions?
No, I'd actually, when I was a kid going to elementary school and in junior high school, I was the kid in the class that would win the prize for the best drawing. And, you would, because people knew what you could do, they would kind of draft you in and say, gee, we're publishing a little something for the school newspaper. Can you do us illustrations of, I don't know, something about the football game or, you know, the mascot or something like that. So I was kind of doing a lot of that stuff and I enjoyed it. And also, even before I went into the army or any of that stuff, I was, like I said, I was kind of a wild child. So I was 15 and a half and I considered I went to San Francisco. Other people would say I ran away to San Francisco, but so I was 15 and a half and I hitchhiked with a friend to San Francisco and we stayed in Haight-Ashbury for about a month. And I was someone that always loved the psychedelic posters. Uh, what was the Family Dog was one of them. Victor Moscow was another great poster designer. Rick Griffin. I looked at all that stuff and loved it. There was a place on Haight Street called the Print Mint that had, I guess they sold a lot of those posters, and I used to spend a lot of time just looking around at what was going on there. So I guess that would also be one of the early influences on me is, deciding that I wanted to be an artist, graphic designer, and also probably one of the reasons why I've always been attracted to text in
I
my
was just having
artwork
that
and
thought.
words and
Yeah.
what you can do with the way you design a letter and the various curly cues and serifs and sans serifs and all that stuff.
And then painting really became a medium that you just through Europe and paint was something you connected
Yes, well,
to.
I was very lucky in that the unit that I was stationed at in Germany, we had pretty large barracks rooms. So I talked to my commanding officer, and he said I could set up an easel in there. So I basically had a little studio in there. I mean,
Wow.
they probably thought it was a lot better than me going and causing trouble, getting drunk, doing that kind of stuff. So I used to spend a lot of time and also did a lot of studying about different painting techniques and things like that. So it'd be interesting for me. I'd be reading about Rembrandt. Oh, he did this, he did that, and and then I would go back in my little studio and sort of play around and try to figure out how he could achieve such and such a technique or such and such an effect. And then there were a lot of the modernists that I was looking at and also sort of thinking about that. So it was a nice
It's like an art residency.
organic way of learning about painting and art
Yeah.
history.
That's wonderful. It's well, let's just maybe talk a bit about your paintings. They're oil paintings of referencing maps and art history of the art communities in New York City. You can probably
Yes,
describe it in a better way.
yes.
Um,
Well, I've been at this long enough that I've done a lot of various different kinds of things. So I guess when I first got to New York, I was doing a series of paintings that were very, and I was influenced by people like Julian Schnabel and Anselm Kiefer. And this is when the neo avant-garde movement was coming on in the early '80s. So you had the three C's: Kukikia and Clementi. You had the German Neue Wilden with Baselitz and Immendorf and Polka, A.R. Pank and all those people. You had the Figuration Nouveau, I think, was that what they call it? Figuration Libre was the French version of that. So I was looking at all of that stuff. And then I was kind of trying to figure out how I would fit in somehow. And so I started doing a lot, painting with a lot of paint. And at some point, I realized that the frame became a very interesting concept for me. And I think it ended up working on a couple of different levels. One of them is the conceptual, just the straight conceptual idea of what happens when you put something into a category, when it sort of leaves the normal world and through some kind of process or a physical thing, it ends up being isolated somehow for some reason. So I started to think about that. And this is also about the time, like I said, there was a lot of the neo-expressionists and a lot of people doing very extravagant, kind of a reaction against minimalism and conceptualism. So a lot of people were using a lot of paint and a lot of things. Schnaber was using broken plates and other people were doing things. So I ended up doing these paintings that had frames kind of built on the edges of them. And I spent about 20 years making going from very simple kind of just mirrors and gold leaf to becoming very ornate things with lots of mosaics and various kinds of things. And so, and the paintings became more and more cubistic. And so I went through a whole lot of phases doing that, and had some success. Showed the works in Europe, in Paris and Munich. Was represented by a gallery in Soho. The lady that I was working with had been a paramour of Leo Castelli, so that was interesting because Leo would sometimes come by the gallery, or she would curate a show and he would come to the show and see people and talk to people. And sometimes he would send his clients, his clients would come into the gallery and they would go, "Oh, Leo, tell us what you've got this week." And he would go, "Well, I have a beautiful Jasper Johns drawing." "Oh, really? Let's see it." "Oh, it's great. How much is it?" "Oh, this is only $150,000. They'd go, "Wow, that's wonderful. You got anything more in our price range?" And you go, "Well, no, but I tell you what, you can go over and there's a very attractive lady that's got a gallery on Green Street. You could go in there and she's probably got something in your price range." And so these people would come by and occasionally they would pick something up at a better price. And sometimes it was something that I'd done or one of the other gallery people were there. We were nowhere in the $150,000 category, but she was able to, keep the gallery going for 4 or 5 years and sold some work. And then I guess it was about the time I turned 50. Actually, it was 2 days after I turned 50. I got a birthday gift from Osama bin Laden. And I hear a crash. I'm here in the studio and I hear a crash and a bang, and I hear people in the street and they're going, "Oh my God." And my wife was going for a job interview and she didn't make it. I went up on the roof and I looked over at the bottom of Manhattan and I see the smoke coming out of the World Trade Centers. And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, a plane has crashed in there." And I was like, "Oh, gee, this is terrible. It's going to take them a long time to repair that. That's going to be terrible." And then I'm still up there and there's another crash and it's like bang. And suddenly you realize that this wasn't some accident that somebody just in a little Piper Cub or something crashed into it. You realize that this was a planned thing. Anyway, so I was up on the roof with binoculars and I watched the World Trade Centers go down. And I guess by about that time I was sort of having a midlife crisis as well. I had a couple of kids. That had been great. They were getting older so that they were able to sort of take care of themselves in a certain way. Um, anyway, so after all the dust settled and everything, I kind of said, I think this is kind of some kind of a signal that I should start doing something else. I was bored with what I was doing, and although I was having a little commercial success with it, it wasn't enough that I was going to continue doing this extremely tedious work. So thought to myself, well, I should just do what I really love, what I really want to
Mm.
do. And the problem was that if you've been doing something and you're used to doing something and you've had some success doing it, you have a reputation doing something, what do you do? So I kind of just thought and, stopped doing any painting for about 6 months or very little, and thought about what I wanted to do, what I would be happy doing. And I came to the simple conclusion that I should do what I love. And then the question is, well, what do you love in the art world or about the art world or anything but as far as your career in the art world goes, what do you love? What do you really love? So I thought about it for another couple of months and I decided, what I really love is I love the art world. I love art history. I love the art community. I love the artists, even though a lot of them are very grumpy, spoiled, discriminatory, but they're the perfect kind of reputation or example of what humanity is. So at that point, okay, well, I want to do something about the community. How do I do that? And I sort of thought about it. And as I said, I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid, and one of the things that I learned when I was a Boy Scout was making, how to read a map and follow a map and things like that. And so I said, gee, it would be interesting to sort of, because we're thinking about the communities, but what is a community? How does a community exist? How does it form? And I thought, well, maybe if you could have maps that would show where somebody like Jackson Pollock was and the other people that formed the abstract expressionists, what kind of relationships they would have beyond the aesthetic points that you would be pointed to in art history. There would be things that would be more physical. What neighborhoods were they in? Were they in the same neighborhoods? Did they go to the same grocery stores? Did they go to the same cafes, the same bars? Things like that. And then as I started to do more research, I found out that yes, they did live in the same neighborhoods. Yes, they had known each other for many years. Yes, they were frenemies, friends and enemies, and they were, competing against each other. They would be in love with the same people and different people, and they would be going to the same bars and getting in bar fights and all this stuff. And I said, this is fantastic. I'm going to start keeping records of it. And about the same time, I also realized that when I first came to New York, I went to school at the Art Students League, studied with a gentleman named Knox Martin, who was a great influence on me. But I started to see that there was a community and there were people that were involved, and that you could take some time and start to sort of to map this out, and then you could start to see not only the aesthetic part, but there's a humanistic part to all this stuff that maybe a lot of people are not aware of. And so that's when I started to collect data. As I was saying, I was working at Utrecht when I first got down. One of my first jobs there at the store was to drive around the delivery truck. So I always kept a little book, and I still have my little book in my pocket, my delivery book. I have a book that had all the addresses of the places that I would go to drop off people's art materials. So I had the address of Julian Schnabel. I think he was on 21st Street. I had the address of Sandro Chia. I used to go over and drop off paint for him all the time. Some other people. But 20 years later, I realized, geez, I've still got these notebooks. So those were also a source for me to pull out and start building my database. So I guess, like I was saying, starting about 2001, I started collecting data, and I'm still collecting data, but probably within about 4 or 5 years, I'd gotten a pretty nice um, file of information and addresses and things. And also, I'd go to libraries, and there was a thing called I think it's the Dictionary of American Artists, something like that. So they go through and they list a lot of various artists, and I would go through, and all the artists in New York, I would sort of copy them out into my little book, and then I'd go home and put them into my database. And that's how I started building the data for the maps. And at some point I said, this is so interesting, I should also extend this out into a diagrammatic format, which goes beyond just the locations of these people, but sort of delves into defining art movements, sensibilities, tendencies, things like that. Because as you start to see these communities form, you also realize that these people get together, they start to spend time, they're going for studio visits, or they're sitting in a bar at night and they're talking about things, and then they start to talk about similar ideas, and they start to share ideas, and one thing catches on with one person, then another person. um, and then you could start to see how the communities and what becomes eventually becomes art history is physically formed, but beyond just the dealing with the ideas. A lot of it is about the people, where they live in the streets, who your friends are, where you go shopping for your bologna or whatever it is that you're having for lunch. And I'm still working on the project.
Well, I think the project is endless now because we're continually
Yes,
shifting. I mean, everything is constantly shifting. But something that I find so interesting about this is that your paintings are really, as you've talked about, they're a diagrammatic representation of this huge body of work. And like you are a researcher and you've
yeah. Well, an
collected a
amateur
lot of
researcher.
these. Pardon?
I'm an amateur researcher.
Well, you could say amateur, but what you've got is probably a very intimate knowledge with a lot of things that a lot of people, just through your own interest in making the paintings, this is what the paintings represent. And something I just thought about when you were talking about this is not only are you collecting the data of all these locations, but you're also driving physically to these places. You're knowing
Yes,
which street to go down. You're there on the sidewalk and you're present. And so you're building this also physical memory, which then I think maybe if we can open our minds a bit, can then be input into the paintings when you're putting down these physical paint and
yes.
making
I
this
often say
painting.
that. Well, right now I'm working on a Tribeca map, so it's great for me because I'm in here. I might be spending 4 or 5 or 6 hours, drawing out the map and using Google Maps and all these things, and sort of
Hmm.
pasting it, and then I have to Photoshop it and twist it and turn it and fudge it a little bit so it fits on the canvas a little better, maybe. And I'll be drawing in the streets and then lettering in the names of the streets and all that stuff. And then later in the afternoon or in the evening, maybe I'll be on my bicycle and I'll be pedaling down the same darn street, and I'll come to a little square or a little triangle in the street, and I'll go, oh, darn, I was just painting this afternoon. And now I get to see
Amazing.
what it looks like in real life. And then I'll look and I'll go, oh, gosh, that's where Richard Serra lived, or that's where Elizabeth Murray lived. And I'll sort of stop there and look up at the windows and notice what's going on. And of course, everything keeps changing. So a lot of the stuff in the address, and people's, they pass away or they move somewhere else. And so I'm actually looking at a lot of this stuff from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. But, you can't. You can't be up to the moment on any of this stuff, and it's part of the history part of it as well, I think.
How long are you spending on a painting? Like, how long would it take?
Well, um, in October this year, I had a show, which is maybe the first show I've had in Manhattan in many years, 12 or 13, 14 years, something like that. And I had 12 paintings in the show. Probably the some of the paintings that took the longest time took about 4 years, 4.5 years. And it's not that I'm working on them every day or
Mm.
something like that, but because I work with a lot of thick paint and I've got a lot of research that I have to do, I'll just keep working on it, sort of keep it, if I'm working on it, it's there in the center of the studio, and then I'll kind of have rolling easels that I keep it on. I'll sort of roll it over the side, let it dry out for a week or two, and then bring it back in, do some more painting on it. And my philosophy is basically I just keep working on them until they're full.
Mm.
It's like going to the all you can eat diner, and you just keep
Yeah.
putting food on your plate until it starts to fall off, and then you go, I guess that's all I can take. So the paintings are kind of like that. I just keep going until there's no more room left, and then I pull out another canvas and start working on another painting.
You also probably have to think about them as timestamps because within that 4 year period, I'm sure, and I don't know how current you are, but in the last 4 years, Tribeca itself has just changed. So,
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons
things are just always cycling. And
that's right. And this is one of the other interesting parts of it is that I've kind of gone through and followed various. Like I said, I've been here over 40 years, and I've had a chance to see how the various neighborhoods become hotbeds of I guess it starts out with artists moving in there, and the artists have their studios there. And then when there gets to be a certain level of studios, then somebody says, well, we'll have some galleries here. We'll have a bar or a nightclub here. And then another gallery opens. And soon as two galleries open, people are going, well, gee, I wanted to open a gallery. But if I'm going to open a gallery, I should open it where there's other galleries there, because that way we can get the foot traffic from those other people. And the next thing you know, you've got a little strip that's got 5 or 6 or 7 galleries there, and maybe a couple of bars within a block or two, and maybe some boutiques and vintage clothing stores or bookstores, things like that start to pop up. And I've seen this cycle happen. Okay, when I got to town, Soho was just taking off, so that was a big deal. And I think at one point there was something in the neighborhood of 450 galleries in Soho, but a lot of that, is it's on the 6th floor, and people have a gallery slash window blind business, or a gallery slash frame shop, or a gallery slash something. But that was what was listed at one point, was something like 400 galleries there. And I can't put all that on the maps. And then Chelsea started to take off. About the same time Chelsea started to take off. So Williamsburg is going hot and heavy for a while. Then people actually started to move up into Greenpoint. At that point, Chelsea started to become huge, and a lot of the galleries ended up moving from Soho to Chelsea. So maybe in the late 90s, Soho just went flat. There was always a couple of galleries there, but nothing like what there had been. And then, well, I forgot the East Village. That was the real kind of thing that shook up Soho, and that was its own little kind of wacky scene. But that always had kind of a tragic tinge to it, and it was always kind of a burnout thing. So it lasted maybe 10 years from the beginning to the end. Anyway, so I've seen the whole cycle run through several times. It's always interesting. It happens a little differently every time. And right now, Tribeca is the place where all that stuff is happening, and that's why I'm working on my Tribeca map.
mm, that's great.
So if
I'm
anybody out
interested.
there has got information about Tribeca, artists that lived in Tribeca, galleries in Tribeca, sad,
Email
tragic
you.
stories about people that were in Tribeca, and you want to pass them on to me,
Have you
send them.
found some incredible stories, or even when you were delivering supplies and speaking to artists, were there things that just happened that you
Every
just
day,
go,
every day, it's
yeah,
just one. Like I said, the art community is a perfect example of the rest of society. So there's always a lot of sad stories, tragic stories. Um, I was talking about Bushwick. That was my last major Brooklyn map, and so started out the Williamsburg was a big scene, and I did several maps of Williamsburg, different parts of Williamsburg, and then Williamsburg got to be gentrified, and people started moving farther east, and so they started a little enclave of galleries in Bushwick, mostly based around, I think it's 56 Bogart Street. But there was a little strip there which had the Bogart Street probably had at some point had 8, 12 galleries in there. And then sort of going either way, north, south, east, or west, there were another string of galleries. Flushing Avenue had a string of galleries. Anyway, so that all kind of crested about 2013, 2014. And so I was doing some other things, but I was still working on some of the big maps. About 3 years ago, I thought I would go back and sort of recap and see what had happened to that community. So you've got a community of probably at some point there was probably about 50 galleries out there, and there's still a lot of artists in their studios. But I started to just go out on weekends and sort of traveled around to sort of visit some of the galleries, or at least the gallery spaces that I had spent many happy hours to, gone to openings there, met a lot of wonderful people, talked about all of the wacky things that artists and gallerists talk about. But I went back there and 90% of them were gone. And then as I started to do research, I started to find out other stories of, oh yeah, there was this gallery and they really like put everything they had into it and they couldn't make it, and they literally like knocked themselves out for 2.5 years, doing all this stuff, putting on shows and organizing this, and then somebody commits suicide and it's like the thing falls apart, and you got all kinds of relationships and girls and boys and boys and boys and girls, and their relationships falls apart, and various the stories would be infinite if I
You
started to
could write a
give
book.
some of them to you, and most of them are very sad, and you would be
Yeah.
crying in your beer all night. But it was interesting just to see how these forces, these encaves, these I guess would be some kind of a spirit of the time within a little community. It comes together and it stays together. If you're lucky, it probably stays together for 2, maybe 3 years, 4 years, and then it's gone. It goes somewhere else. People move on. They age out. They have kids. They have relationships. People get sick. They get job offers. A lot of people end up going out and teaching somewhere in Oregon or God only knows where. Go to Argentina, who knows where, but they come together for a while and then they get blown to the four corners of the earth.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how that kind of I'm going to assume it nourishes you and kind of feeds that output of the work that you're making is just being part of those, like how important that research and connection really is mirrored in the work that you're doing, because there is so much of that energy alive, and the multiple
Yes,
layers of what's happening in your paintings. It's present.
I
And it's
think one
like
of the
maybe you could dive into the painting and, be in a different world or something, transported to.
I have had people say that they go up and and this is one of the fun things about having the show is I probably shouldn't talk about this either, but going in and seeing a lot of people that you've seen for a long time, and it's like, oh gee, I've known that person since they were like a wild 28-year-old punk rocker with the purple mohawk and the studded leather jackets, and now you see them and they're walking with a cane.
Yeah.
The hair is all white and they've got the little spectacles on there, and they're sort of like going up and going, oh yeah, I remember that gallery. Oh, that was so much fun
Yeah.
when I was a youngster. But on the other hand, I think one of the other interesting thing is that, and I think this is probably maybe one of the trends that's been, and I guess maybe it happens all the time, but it's just that haven't been aware of it so much. But I think part of it is because the art market has become so big and so hungry. Well, parts of it have become very hungry for new art, significant art, and things that are within a price range that people can afford. I think that people are spending a lot more time maybe looking back at past eras and sort of reevaluating them and saying, gosh, Gracie Mansion Gallery in the East Village was really fantastic, and she showed a lot of great artists, and a lot of them didn't get any attention now, and maybe even some of them have passed away, and maybe it's time for us to take a second look at these people. And so a lot of these people and places have been getting a second look and a renewed interest in themselves, their careers, and also the community and all that. And so people are, there's a certain kind of a nostalgia thing that's going on now. I think part of the thing that's going on now is like there's a big nostalgia for the 90s, and I
Something a bit
guess
more
that kind of is
real.
how it works.
Mm. I was thinking a lot about when I was looking, and when I look at your paintings, there is so much information, and um, I mentioned before about this intimacy of building knowledge just through making the work. That this idea for me came through of, a lecture series, but using your paintings as the slides of the presentation, and being an educator. And I thought about Klaus Oldenburg's The Store and how that was just an
Sure.
installation about that. And I was wondering, what if it would be fantastic to have a lecture series by you and be given this kind of art history.
I have a
Um,
lot of people that have suggested that to me, and I have done
yeah.
lectures. I also, I do my YouTube channel as well. Maybe we can talk about
Hmm.
that a little
We want to
later.
get to
But
that, definitely. Yeah.
um, I have a lot of people that are constantly, sometimes through the YouTube channels, but also just through my website and things. I have a lot of people that send in emails from places like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Norway, Germany, Italy, the Asian subcontinent, um, Thailand, all over the place. And they say, oh, gee, we've used your YouTube videos as instructions. We use your maps as diagrams when we're talking about something, pop art, conceptual art, these various kinds of things. And it makes me very happy, and people say, well, you should do a lecture series. And that would be nice. But then again, it's like, that's a lot of time. And
Sure.
I'm sitting here thinking, I should be working on paintings, but then that's another 4 years to finish I'm going to try to hurry, and I'm going to try to finish the Tribeca map. And I've already been working on it for like a year. I'm going to try to finish that one up in maybe only 2.5 years,
Yeah.
which means I should get to get to work right away.
You don't have time. Yeah, and you have to prioritize. But I do think,
That's right.
or I recognize the amount of knowledge that you have in a very different way to sort of traditional art history, or maybe you speak about it with a different vitality
Well, I
that
think
comes
one of the
across differently than from reading an art history book, or
yeah, that's right. That's right. It's one thing to have someone who has never been, and this is what I grew up with when I was going to school at Idaho State University. It's something else to have someone giving you a lecture about Vincent van Gogh and why he's important,
Mm,
but these people have, maybe they've seen one or two Vincent van Gogh paintings in their life when they, went on a field trip to San Francisco and saw, one or two paintings there. That's different than someone like myself who went to the Van Gogh Museum 5 times and spent literally days in front of these various paintings, looking at one painting for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. So, and it's the same thing when you start to think about something like pop art, when you, and I've met some of the pop artists. I actually worked for Larry Rivers for a couple of years, did some touch up work and re, re facilitated some of his projects and things like that. So I have a little different view and talk to him I mean, he loved to talk about stuff. So I would have a little different view of what pop art was, even proto pop art of these various things, than someone that had been just reading about it in a book. Or maybe they could have a degree, they could even have a doctorate in some of these things,
mm,
but they've never
mm.
been in the streets. And that was always one of the things that was ironic for me, is that I've done lectures and I continue to do lectures, but I would go out and I don't have a degree. I'm a dropout. But when someone who has a degree and maybe has their doctorate in something calls on me and they say, could you come and talk to our students because you know more about this than I know about it, or anybody in our department knows about it? I would say absolutely.
Well, it's knowledge, not the degree. And
Yes, and
technically, the
also I think
degree is meant to help you get knowledge, but
we
you
talk
found
about
it
it. I
in a
mean, like
different
getting the
way.
knowledge in an organic way. This is
Mm,
not from books. This is like we were saying. You're pedaling down
living
the
and
street. You're looking in people's windows. You're going to galleries. You see somebody and you run over and you talk to them and ask them questions. I was at a show, I guess at this point it's probably a year ago, and Julian Schnabel's there, and I've been sort of peripherally bouncing off him for 40 years. But I get to walk over and go, "Hey, Julian, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Is that kitsch?" And he's sort of, "Well, what do you mean by kitsch?" So, and it's different than someone that's like, "Well, I read an art forum article about Julian 10 years ago."
are you a quite social, outgoing person, or has that developed just from being part of the community?
Well, my joke is that I have two personas. I have the Loren Munk character, the Loren Munk, which is the name I was born with, and that's my children's name and all that stuff. So that's one persona. Then I have the James Kalm persona, which is the name that I've been writing art criticism and art reviews under for 23 years, 24 years. So the James Kalm is probably more gregarious and more outgoing. The Loren Munk is the guy that's for spending 3.5 years in the studio painting text onto a huge map and doing other kinds of things like that. So I kind of split it up, although I have to say I've been spending more time as the Loren Munk character lately because due to the show, I've gotten some attention. People are sort of hinting that, gee, if you get more of these done, you have opportunities to show them in various places. And so I don't have quite as much time to run out and spend making videos or visiting shows or going to openings. But I would say that one of the things I've learned is of doing the research. I've really learned how important being part of the community is. And you could almost say that being part of the community might even be, and being an important part of the community and a strategic part of the community, as far as having a career in the art world, might be more important and more significant than the work that you make. Because I know a lot of people and I love them, and I'm looking at the work and I'm going, well, it's okay. It's not, this is not a breakthrough. This is not Marcel Duchamp coming up with a urinal on a pedestal or something like that. But it's pretty good, and they're, I like them, and I can see where they would, But but the fact that they're extremely social, they're people that make connections with people, and they're looking to connect other people together. They're doing a lot of stuff. They're curating shows. They're fantastic, and in that way, they are important artists, and they're important to the community. And so that's a very, very big part of what it means to be an artist. And
Mm.
everybody hopes, gee, I'd like to be the person that does the splash paintings that made Jackson Pollock, or do the poured paintings that made Helen Frankenthaler, or the broken plate paintings that made Julian, or the wax paintings that made Jasper Johns. Maybe everybody isn't going to be able to do that, but if you could do the things of curating shows, writing reviews, putting connections, putting one artist together with another artist, or one artist together with a collector, or a collector together with a curator, or something like that. That's that's part of your art. That really is maybe as important as the sculpture, paintings, dance, poetry, or whatever else you're making, as far as you're really calling your art.
And maybe it was happening on a very, it's a very different scale of people. And back then, there was a much smaller group of people that maybe they had time to just chat and then also make paintings and spend a lot of time in the studio. And now the world is very different, that it's a whole different set of parameters of how to engage and be an artist and find that connection community in a way that's, let's say, quiet and also connecting.
Yeah, no, I would say that is true, or at least parts of it are true. Um, the other thing that I keep bouncing off is last weekend was the Outsider Art Fair, which I love, and I've been covering on my YouTube channel for geez, gosh, 17, 18 years. But there's the whole question of the commercial aspect of things. And it kind of drifts over from not only the outsider world, although the outsider world has become a whole different thing in the last 10 or 12 years. But one of the things that I know, even in my little end of the, I guess I would call it the fine art world of New York, is that there are a lot of people, fairly young people, who are able to command enough of the market that they are no longer having to spend 8, 10, 12 hours in the studio because they can afford to hire assistants to do their work. And it might just be someone that's doing their office work, someone's doing their correspondence, someone's registering all the work, someone's keeping track of where the paintings are traveling to, or if they're in shows, someone's doing social media for them. Someone's, there's a lot of, for a lot, especially a lot of the work that I see now, there's a lot of very tedious parts to, and especially some of the sculptural things that I see. There's a lot of very tedious work. And it used to be that the artists would be doing most of that stuff themselves, but now half of being a successful artist is how good you are at managing your staff, your team. I'm sure Jeff Koons probably only sees the sculpture. He makes a little drawing and hands it off to the studio manager, and the studio manager goes off to the people that are doing the designing on the computers and comes back a couple of days later with their little designs. And Jeff is sort of going, okay, let's go in this direction, and maybe we change this a little, change that a little bit. And meanwhile, he's doing gosh only knows what.
He can
But
just
he's
polish it at
he's
the
just would
end
be the
before it
top of
gets on the
the top
truck.
of the pyramid. I see. Here was a funny story. Young artist I met, he was a Williamsburg artist, working painting. I liked his work. I'm not going to mention his name. Started to get successful, was showing with another gallery that had been in Williamsburg. Um, Started to get some action, and then I saw him and I said, gee, the show is great, but it seems like the paintings are a little different. He goes, well, I'm actually working for another artist, a very successful artist, and I'm doing the paintings for this guy, it's actually very good because he can pay me a fairly substantial rate for what I'm doing there. The problem is that I have no time in the studio. So what I've had to do is I've had to hire people to make my paintings. So I have to charge the guy that I'm making the paintings for enough money that I can afford to pay the two people that are making my paintings, you know,
No.
so they could, yes, this is a true story, so that they can make my paintings. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, how important is it for you to make them?
I love to make the paintings and think about the paintings. I love to mix the paint. I love to go in and shop at the art stores. I was thinking I was shopping for some Sunthickened linseed oil at a place called Soho Art Supplies. I think it's on Wooster Street near Canal. I
Mm-hmm.
go in there all the time. I buy my linen there. But I was buying a
They're a lovely
particular
art store.
type of linseed oil. I like to use sun-thickened linseed oil. Gives your oil paint a lot of body and all that stuff. Anyway, I pull out this bottle and I take it over to the register, and he looks and goes, well, you've got to pay attention. This is the sun-thickened linseed oil, but this is the leaded sun-thickened linseed oil. And I'm going, really? It's leaded? He goes, yeah. And you want the plain straight sun-thickened linseed oil. And I used to make it on the roof, but it takes 3 months to make it. And so anyway, so I'm going to have to do some research on leaded sun-thickened linseed oil. So I come back to my loft and I'm here on the computer and I'm doing some research. And I find out that the leaded sun-thickened linseed oil is made the same way as regular sun-thickened linseed oil, except that they put a little plate of lead in the bottom of the tray that they put in the sun. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm going, this has always been my theory. Being a painter is actually being an alchemist, but it's evolved from what it was. It's like the dinosaurs evolved into being birds. The alchemy and the stuff that everybody was doing back in the medieval days and maybe back in ancient Egypt and all that, all the alchemy is kind of evolved into now these people are all making paintings. And when you start to look at the different kinds of pigments, the different processes, the different kinds of things, I mean, who's going to be going out and getting stuff, glue made from rabbit skins and all kinds of things with charcoal and mercury and lead? And so that's one of the things I love about the painting part of it. And I wouldn't want to, I'm not going to hire someone to go out and do that. It'd be like an alchemist hiring someone else to go through the process. And then when you get to the Philosopher's Stone, it wouldn't be yours. It'd be someone else's.
Mm. And I think about this idea of, you've got all this anchor of the map paintings and um, documenting these ideas, but at the same time, it's just this anchor to make a painting and do
Yes.
the alchemy and participate in the connection with the material. And yeah, I cannot understand artists that give away the work to someone else, because well, for me, it's the work is the joy.
Well, I think that, and as I was talking about alchemy, it's about perfecting yourself.
Mm.
And no matter how tedious the job is, there's something about what you're thinking about, what you're looking at, the materials, the feel that you have with the surface and these kinds of things, that if you don't spend the time, you're not going to have the same benefit. You're not going to get the same knowledge. You're not going to be boiling down your philosopher's stone in the same way.
Do you believe you can get the philosopher's stone? Like, I think this journey of being an artist and searching, it's like, do you think it's attainable, or it's just a process of revealing yourself to,
It's
like, will there
never,
be that painting that's boom, that's it, I've got it?
it's the journey, it's the goal, and you hope you never
Yeah.
get to the goal, because when you get to the goal,
That's
that's
it.
the end. And I guess maybe you get to the goal and there's another goal beyond that somehow. At least you
Right.
hope, but it's the fun of the journey, and that's why I love to ride my bike. It's like it's not about. I mean, you're going from point A to point B, but mostly it's that trip in between that's entertaining.
Mm. So let's talk about riding bikes and James Kalm, um, which is how I was introduced by your YouTube channel. And it's this beautiful, very raw, engaging insight into the galleries and shows in New York City, which I find I can't go to everything. And, if there's something I've missed or there's something 20 years ago that I'd like to look at, I go to you because it feels real. It doesn't feel contrived, and you have this beautiful kind of whispering documentary of what's going on. It's like you're really there with you, just sneaking around the gallery. And how did that we're just talking about this idea of discovering and revealing yourself. It feels like that's a really important part of who you are, and
Yes.
like it needed to exist with the paintings and the painting practice for you to be kind of embodied or in yourself.
Well, the whole James Kalm story is long and intricate and all these things, but I guess it all started and was probably my kids turned me on to this. So it's back in the early days of the internet, and when things like YouTube and some of those Facebook and some of those early things were happening. One of my kids said, "Gee, Dad, they got this thing on the computer, and you can go online and you can like watch videos." And I'm like, "Really?" And they're going, "Yeah, you should turn this on." So I go in and I'm click on YouTube and I'm looking and I see this. I think it was a Frank Zappa video of Frank Zappa on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I looked at it and I said, "God, that's great." This is like it was before the Mothers of Invention, so maybe 1965, 66, something like that. About a week later, when I finally broke myself away from watching these videos, I said, something fantastic about there's some kind of a potential that we could use somehow in the art world or in my pursuit of trying to represent what the art community is. I didn't know anything about videos at the time. I didn't know how to edit a video. I didn't know how to record a video. Um, about the same time, I bought my first digital camera. It was a little Elf. And I would go out and I would take just still pictures at openings and look at them later. And sometimes I would try to get a picture of a painting that I was interested in. Then I'd go back and I would write a review for the Brook and Rail or some of the other magazines or things that I was writing for. And then one day I was out taking some pictures and I came back across the Brooklyn Bridge and I came home and I plug in my little chip into my computer and I'm downloading the images and then I see a little icon that pops up and I go, that's weird. What the heck is that? And I click on it and it was a video of the camera hanging off my neck as I went across the Brooklyn Bridge and it's sort of dangling back and forth. And, you know, mostly you see the sidewalk and the front wheel of the bicycle. But I looked at that and I said, I could make videos somehow. Anyway, and I've told this story before, but there was a fantastic, maybe the who I would call the professor emeritus of the New York school was a guy named Irving Sandler, one of the great art critics of all time, New York art critics of all time. He had published at this point, he had published something in the Brook and Rail titled something like A Call to Art Critics or something like that. And he was complaining at the time because what had happened, and I guess it was part of the whole social media, the internet, and all that stuff, was that print media was starting to die. So a lot of the major newspapers had started to cut back on all their art critics. And so a lot of major newspapers, they just closed the whole thing down. And even places like the New York Times and some of the other local places, and a lot of the magazines folded. But his opinion was it was time that we had to come up with a new way of putting art criticism out there and making people aware of what was going on, and also maybe trying to include people that were not part of the little art ghetto, the little art critical ghetto, the academics and the maybe some of the more educated painter or artists, whatever stripe. And he said, and we need new voices because we've got to find a new way, new voices, new things, because the old thing is dying. And it was apparent at that time. So I sort of said, using and thinking about that, I said, we got this thing called YouTube. I've got this little camera. Maybe I should try to figure out how to start putting this together. So I put out a little email request to all the people I knew at the Brook and Rail. Like, does anybody know how to edit video, edit digital video? And I put it out there for like 2 months. Nobody replied. And it must have gone out to like 25, 30 people. Nobody replied. So at that time, I realized that I had a little very basic video program on my computer. It was in one of the Microsoft programs. Anyway, so I put a couple of little programs together. I started posting them. And basically, I just taught myself how to edit video. And I'm still learning all the time. I'm still learning. But I started posting the videos. And you were talking about them being raw and kind of intimate,
Wobbly.
and
Let's say they're wobbly and raw.
which has always been part of my aesthetic. And so I started doing that in 2006. So at this point, it's been 19 years I've been doing this, and I've got something in the neighborhood of over, I think, 1,700 of them posted on YouTube, and probably another several hundred that are just posted on, well, I used to be on Facebook, but then I got hacked. But there are a few still on Instagram, but on my Instagram account got hacked. And anyway, so one of my goals with doing the James Kalm, I have two channels, the James Kalm Report and the Rough Cuts. One of my goals is to try to establish an archive of gallery openings, but it also includes museum shows, studio visits, couple of poetry readings. Sometimes I'll go to a lecture where there'll be an artist and a critic that'll have a discussion, and I'll record that, post that. But I wanted to build an archive, at least a rough archive of what kind of the down and dirty part of the New York art world was, because I'm sure that the Museum of Modern Art, they're always going to have their high tech, very
Mm.
slick people, and they'll have a team of 4 or 5 people in there, putting the mics on everybody, checking their makeup, and making sure that everything is done perfectly and lighting all the people's faces properly and all that stuff. I don't do any of that. And
Well, I think the integrity of, especially as technology has changed, I admire you for not going slick, because I think you could have easily been pushed into that, but you've just kept it very unique and in your voice. And it says a lot about you and how you're crafting and curating the videos.
well, I think part of it too is that I always wanted to keep it kind of personal and intimate. So I get the feeling it's like going to a gallery with your friends. Maybe you've been somewhere, you had a glass of wine or a beer or something. Maybe you had a little discussion in the street, and then you walk into the gallery. And as you're walking around, you're sort of talking about this, and maybe something happens, or something is funny, or you notice, gee, I saw something about this in the review that I saw online, but it was a still photograph, and I didn't notice this or that. And that kind of stuff is very important for me.
Mm.
And I always want to make it kind of, like I said, very personal, kind of intimate. And I have people that always, actually, at this point, because I've been doing it for, like I said, 19 years, people are always joking about, I love the heavy breathing. So
Yeah.
part of it is because I've just pedaled there. I pedaled from like Brooklyn to the Upper East Side somewhere, and I'm like, I'm winded. But the other thing is, like, I'm holding the camera up very close to my face because I don't want to be someone that's like kind of,
Selfing themselves around the
well, but also
gallery.
making so much noise that everybody else in the gallery is like looking at you going, what the hell, who is this guy like
Mm.
talking? Because I mean, I go into galleries and people are talking on their cell phones like they're yelling into the cell phone and like, oh
Can't
yeah,
stand
Reed,
it.
did you pick up the lunch for the kids or not? Did you? Oh, I need to pick up something at the dry cleaners. And well, I don't want to be, and I don't want to be that person that's doing it. Although I guess I probably am kind of making a little noise. It's kind of annoying for people.
Yeah, but there's a different way of people. I remember I was in one of the Guston shows in maybe the last 5 years, and I was just sitting there quietly, these big paintings, and this woman's got the loudspeaker on her phone, just chatting away, not even looking at the paintings. And I thought,
No,
well, why are you here? Go and stand on the street.
no, and
It's
getting back
crazy.
kind of my format, it is kind of, and there were many years when I first started doing that people would run me out of the gallery, and I
Well, I
would
want
be
to
in there,
ask your
and
relationship with
they
security
would catch
guards.
me with the
Yeah.
camera, and they would say, "You're out of here. We can't let you do this." And I always knew that when that happened, that was gold. That was solid gold when they would kick me, especially if I got kicked out of a museum. That was like really good. I got kicked out of a Jean-Michel Basquiat show at Gagosian, and I still get people, and this is 12 years ago, people are writing and going, oh man, it was so great that you took the time to go in there. And even though
Yeah.
they ran you out, I mean, the guards, the guards are nice, but they sort of were in on the joke as well. I was, I was at a Philip Guston show and I got kicked out. And I still, just last month I had someone go, I'm glad you took the time and you even like put up with the humiliation of being kicked out and had these people like grab you by the collar and like throw you out of the gallery. But like I said, it was solid gold. The other thing is that you were talking about as the technology has changed and everybody's gotten slicker. One of the things that I never want to do is to present the videos as if there's some kind of advertisement or a sales pitch. You go on Instagram now and it's like, coming to Hauser and Wirth this coming Friday. You too can come in, take a look at blah, 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 blah. And you see this beautiful young lady kind of drifting in front of the painting, and she's beautifully coiffed and it has got the, designer clothes on. And well, I mean, I see those people there. I'm not, I probably wish I was hanging out with them, but they're not, they're going out of their way to kind of avoid me. So I'm with the other crowd that are kind of, picking their nose and scratching their heads and sort of looking at it. The other thing is that, so I've been doing this for 19 years and I never appear on camera.
Mm.
I'm always doing this from, what do they call it? Voce Soto, something like that. It's always like the voice from behind the camera.
And the personal
And
point of view.
but
Yeah.
what it goes to is what you're talking about, people going in there yakking but never looking at the paintings. I watch things, and I'm not going to mention any names, but some of them are extremely well-known local art critics that we love. But you watch their reviews, and it's like their face taking up all the space, and they're talking, and it's all about them. And then you look at the painting for like 2 seconds, and it's back on them. I never want to do that. I don't want to be on the screen. I want to be looking at the paintings and doing close-ups and backing away, or looking at the sculpture and how does this look in space, and also kind of maybe flashing around and seeing who else is in the gallery. That's as interesting as some other things. Also, one of my trademarks is that I try to start all of the shows with a busker, someone playing music in the street. Partially, it's just because like I said, I've been doing this long enough, and there was a long time that I had to figure out how do you make these. First of all, how do you make these things unique so that people are going to recognize them as your work? Second of all, how do you make them appealing so that people are going to want to spend? Because I did the Outsider Art Fair video. I guess I posted it 2 days ago. It's an hour and 13 minutes, and if you're not a serious, as I call them, paint head or an outsider art head, that's a long, long, long time to sit in front of a video screen and watch something. So one of the things that I learned is that if you've got something beyond just you and your camera, if you've got something that's pleasant, that might not be overwhelming, that's going to make people want to watch longer. So the music became a big part of it. Then I also realized that, as I was saying, I wanted to keep the work intimate and real. And I get the feeling that when I show the musicians, and a lot of times I might run in and do a report on something, and I'll walk out and pedal down the block to Union Square, Washington Square Park, or even just on the street, and I'll see somebody playing, and I'll whip out the camera and make a little video of them playing. I try to donate if I've got some, well, what I call busker bucks in my pocket. I'll throw in a buck or two. But I get the feeling that that adds to the context. And we were talking about all of this, all of the art communities and all the art that is being created and the aesthetics that are going along with that. These all exist within a time frame, within a little bubble of reality that we live in. And I really feel like the music and all the other things, people in the galleries, people walking in and out the front door, people chatting in the background, that's all part of this experience. And that's part of why the work is not so slick, because when you slick things up, you take all that stuff away. You're looking at a film that's been put out by Hausenwerth, Gagosian, David Zwirner. You're never going to hear people chatting in the background. You're never going to hear people laughing. You're never, it's all going to be very clean, very, flowing. Everything is smooth. And I don't want
I
that.
imagine you have a lot of international viewers as well, which don't get to live or may never come to New York City, and so they get to
That's right.
feel like they're in it and part of it and breathing it. And yeah, you do. You hand a buck down and you put it down in the
I've
tin.
had people
And
criticize me for that.
no, I like it. I think you're being real. And in terms of the music, I was on the subway the other day and there was someone playing, and I just had this thought of, if I was in a jazz club right now, this would be incredible. Like, this musician would be revered as incredible, but here I am in the subway, and it means nothing. That I mean, not it means nothing. I mean, the location is irrelevant. Like, this person is performing, and that's who they are, and they're doing this great music.
Yes.
And I think buskers in New York have this incredible skill and need to be acknowledged and recognized. And I like that you include them, because there is now this archive of all these people that they might have just been here for a week and then.
Yes. Also, because I've been out doing this for so long, I've gotten to know some of them, maybe not personally, but I do know them by their names, and I've known them
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. And there are some extremely poignant things that I've captured. And it's not even about, I mean, sometimes it's just the quality of the performance is amazing. The other part to it is that some of these people are just such fantastic examples of the challenges that you face going out trying to be an artist, and beyond being an artist, going out and doing it in public. And in a certain way, you want to contribute something, your creativity, that little flame that you have that you're hoping is going to be special and maybe help somebody else along. But I've seen some incredibly poignant things, people with like only part of one arm playing guitars, and you're just looking at them going, oh my god.
How do you do
And then you
that?
see them two or
Yeah.
three more times, and it's like, oh, you're still doing this. It's fan, and other things. Just a lot of these people are, well, on the verge of homelessness and other kinds of things, and it's just so real. It is so rich, and just can tug at your heartstrings. And then other times it's just like, oh man, that is such a, somebody's playing some hard rock and roll, right? Exactly what you need. And it just happens to meld with the show you just came out of, and you're going, oh man, I couldn't have asked
You
for a
got me.
better intro for
Yeah.
this band. This is going to be great. But sometimes it's not. I go, sometimes it's really great. And then there are other times. But it's also, I think it's like anything in the art world. Not everything is going to be fantastic. And some of it might be what you consider at the time to be bad, or maybe not up to your standards. But as time goes by, you start to look at it and go, well, you know what? I didn't like this at the time, but I'm thinking that there's, and you're hoping that when you put it out in the world, and this is the other thing that's always funny. I'll do something and I'll go, okay, that was all right. And I've known this artist and I think the work is pretty good. And then it's like, well, I got to go on to the next thing. It doesn't really stick with me. And then I'll get emails back in a month or two. Sometimes some years later, and people going, oh my God, I am so glad that you put out that video. What you showed me there has inspired me. I've been thinking about this, and was working along those lines, and this really like kept me going. And I'm so happy that I saw that, and I'm sort of going, well, that makes me feel good. And then I go back and I look at it and go, yeah, you're right. And so in that way, I sort of think to myself, I have to be much more open-minded and democratic about things, and try to, I guess, would be more a question of just keeping a record of what's happening rather than saying, well, this is good or this is bad. It's almost more
Mm.
important just to sort of have a cross view, a cross section of what's happening.
Yeah, and I think art criticism, and so you were doing a lot of writing for a while, and so you had that experience, and it's like you've brought together the ability to look at art and comment on it in a very democratic way, but then you've brought in this. It's like you've brought in as well the visiting to artist studios and doing all of those drives around New York and building that history, and you've put them together in this really unique way that just speaks of you, and it speaks of everything that you're doing
Well, thank
as
you.
pointing to this one kind of, not one trajectory, but it's like you're aligned in everything that you're doing is feeding this same idea of creating an archive, a history, connection with people, providing an opportunity for people to engage in the world and respond to it in their own way. And I think that's it's really lovely. And you're talking
Thank you.
about that kind of midlife crisis that you had and trying to find something that you love. I'm wondering if you could just talk about how you've reflected, or can you reflect on making sense of that trajectory, and maybe it wasn't what everyone else is doing, maybe you weren't having gallery shows all the time, and but you've kind of found something that I feel embodies who you are in
Yes.
an authentic way. How do you think about
Well,
that?
as I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen many art movements, neighborhoods, artists, um, people that come out of nowhere. They kind of take their careers take off like a rocket. They're big stars for a year or two. Then the careers sort of go away. Fashions change, styles change, neighborhoods change. People get older. Suddenly, the person that was like the hottest superstar in the firmament is no longer there, and you don't even know where they are. It's like, what the heck happened to those people? Sometimes these people have tragic things. They die young, doing various kinds of things. Um, so my trajectory, like a lot of people, you come into a place like New York. Some people think it is the center of the art world, and I don't know about that, but it's certainly one of the centers of the art world. And I know that there's a lot of the art market that is centered here. And I think that the art market makes people focus in ways that they might not if there wasn't a lot of money involved. So one of the things, if you're doing this on a long-term basis, is you have to sort of think about what can I do to distinguish myself from the, gosh, I don't know how many artists there are in New York, hundreds of thousands. Well, let's just say 100,000 people that are out there making art and trying to distinguish themselves from the other 100,000 people that are here. So that's a very tricky question. A lot of people are doing strange things. And I had to kind of think about that myself. And I was doing some things that sort of got a little attention. But like I said, I had to think about what I wanted to do and what I loved and what I could keep doing for a long time. A lot of people come out and they start doing something and they kind of run out of ideas after 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Um, Dealing with the art community, the great thing is that it's never gonna end. It's never gonna be the same. There's always gonna be stuff changing. Um, when I got to my midlife crisis, when I turned 50, I did sort of think about, and I decided that I didn't want to keep doing what I had built a reputation on, what I had kind of had my brand. I realized if I was going to do this and I wanted to do it and do it in a way that I would get the kind of, hopefully, some kind of recognition, some kind of a distinction away from the 100,000 other people, I would have to do something that very few people had really done. And I would have to do it in a way that other people, especially people in the art world, would appreciate and understand. So I had to, and I thought about it. And then when I came up with the idea that one thing that people always are interested in, especially in the art community, they're interested in themselves. So if you could do something that in a certain way would reflect on people's as themselves and reflect on their world and reflect on their communities, that they would be more inclined to pay attention to what you're doing, which was fine with me because I always kind of enjoyed, like I said, being on the other side of the camera, looking at these various groups, people's communities, trying to be part of all that stuff, but also always as kind of an outsider. I was thinking of Jane Goodall, the lady that studied the apes. She was Gorillas in the Mist, I think was one of her books, something like that. And she became very famous for going some place in Africa. She went off into the boonies and was up in the foothills in the rainforest, and she happened to find this community of gorillas. And she really wanted to dig in and study this in a way that nobody had ever done before. So she had her supplies and had her little camp or whatever set up, but kept it very simple and very basic. And every day she would go out hike, I don't know, several miles into this place where there was this, I guess you would call them a tribe of gorillas. And just from the edges, she kept watching them and paying attention to them and making notes and giving them names. And they became very personal to her. But over years and years of doing this, she was able to collect enough information from looking at these gorillas that she gave anthropology and all of this sociology and all these things insights that they never would have had because nobody was able to sort of take on this kind of a project in a very personal way. The other great thing about it was that she talks about after doing this for like months and months and maybe years, the gorillas sort of just looked at her as part of the part of the tribe, part of the family, and she would be out there, and they would sort of look, and she go, oh, they look, and they go, oh, there she is, and she's kind of doing things to kind of imitate them, like snapping the little plants, like they're when they're eating stuff, they hear that, so they hear her sort of doing that, and they're just going, yeah, she's another one of the girls. I mean, she's kind of looks kind of weird, sort of like the weird ant that's always there on the edge of the tribe. But hey, that's great. We've been seeing her every day for the last 15 years. So, we've got nothing to fear from her. We think she's good. She's kind of fun. It's interesting to have her here. And, we teach the kids about her and it's like, yeah, don't worry about her. She's okay. So in a certain way, there was that kind of a sense, but it's been a wonderful journey. I've loved it and I'm still working on it. And, I find it incredibly fascinating. And like I say, a lot of it is sad, tragic, heartbreaking. But then there's the other side to it, which is like very happy, fulfilling, loving, um, satisfying, and beautiful.
Mm. I mean, it's
And
part of
what can you
life. You
ask? What
can't
more can
separate
that
it.
than that can you ask for?
Mm. So I love that story that you shared about the gorillas. I ask everyone this question: what do you celebrate
What do I celebrate?
in life? Not necessarily about art.
Mostly causing trouble and being annoying. I love to celebrate that. Well, I celebrate my family. I've had my first granddaughter was born on Valentine's Day last year, so she had her first birthday
Wonderful.
party, and I wasn't out in California, which is where she lives, but we celebrated that. I've got another grandchild on the way, so I celebrate that. I celebrate my wife. My nom de guerre is James Kalm, and people go, "Where did you get that name? Your real name is Loren Munk, but where did you get the James Kalm part?" And I said, "Well, my name is Loren Munk, so that's LM. My wife's name is Ka. So my name Kalm is Kate
Ah,
Augenblick Loren Munk. So every time I say that name or put that on any of my productions or anything, I'm celebrating her.
it's lovely.
And just generally, I like to celebrate Thursday nights because that's when a lot of the galleries in Tribeca are open for their openings that night. And I celebrate whenever the paint store is open, so I can run over and grab some oil paint and keep working. Um, Other than that, well, Halloween.
Mm. What do you do outside of painting? Like, do you have time for anything else aside from family? Do you read books?
I do read books. I love to read philosophy and art history. I love all that. Um, Gosh, that's about it. I'm pretty simple guy. I don't spend a lot of money on clothes or fast cars or wine or stuff like that. It's just go down to J.C. Penney's, buy the cheapest white shirts and painter's pants I can get, and go to work.
Well, both to Loren Monk and to James Kalm, I say thank you for holding I think particularly now in this kind of crazy world of like so many different value systems, I feel you hold this integrity that maybe you developed at a younger age and have been able to maintain that presence for us to kind of experience. And it's really valuable. And you say you're a simple person and you're just doing your thing. I think it oscillates out and can contribute to many people's lives. And I also think the work you're doing has a history and an archive that can be referenced, in 10 years' time. And that's a great contribution of your time and effort, which may not be necessarily how you're looking at it, but yeah, it's really I'm privileged to be like in New York at the same time as you. It's
Well,
and we
no,
talk
thank
about
you.
these
And
people, so
thank you,
thank you.
Emily, for taking the time to have a little chat.
Mm.
And you're saying, what do I celebrate? Well, one of the things I think that is important is acknowledging other people when somebody tries to do something, even if they fail,
Mm,
even if
mm.
they might not be doing it as well as they hope to, just getting out there and giving it a shot. And then people looking and acknowledging it and going, hey, I saw that. Keep going, man. That's so important. So important.
Yeah,
So thank you
that's
for
cool.
this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, back to the studio, and I can't wait to see some more paintings.
All right. You
Good
too.
luck,
Thank you so
Tribeca.
much,
Yeah,
Emily.
thanks,
All right.
Loren.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to We Are Art People. You can listen to full episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We are online at www.weareartpeople.com. Sign up to our newsletter for show updates and happenings, and please share with someone who may enjoy listening. See you next time.